Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
It is February 24th, my friends. Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch. And I'm Catherine White, your host, bringing you the guests, the issues, the action. We are fueling the grassroots community to get things done, make politics fun, and we're going to get perked up today. We're going to get woke up and we're going to get ready. So we're so glad you're here because our theme is more civility. Raising consciousness. That's what we're doing today. So I would love to take the moment to bring our guests up, and I would love to start with a very special woman, Margaret Morrison, that is a friend of the show, that's been just our friend for this past. Margaret, how long have you been with us now? Is it going on 2 years that you've been hanging with this crew?
Absolutely. And I have enjoyed every moment. I've learned so much, and I'm so appreciative because what you do forwards democracy. And that's my goal.
And I love the color you have on. It's so bright. And I think it does raise, we need to just get us all to a certain level. And that color is bringing us up. So I appreciate it. It's so good to see you.
Great. And I'm not going to let anybody turn me around.
That's what I want to hear. That's right. And that's it. And you haven't. So we can't wait to hear about your long history of activism, and you inspire us all the time when we talk to you. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. It's going to be excellent. And next up, new friends of the show. I'm so excited. CommonBondz, Apryll Adams and Mike DeCandido. Is Mike up? You want to bring Mike to Apryll? Welcome. You are the president of CommonBondz and co-founder with Mike. DeCandido.
DeCandido, yep.
DeCandido. How are you all doing today? And also, not going to let anything turn you around.
We're wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for having us. It's definitely an honor to be with you guys. And I really love what you are doing I don't know if it's every day, every
Friday, but we do.
Yeah, it's wonderful, wonderful thing that you guys are doing. And so thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Fennell. Thank you, Miss Margaret, the whole team for having us.
Yeah, it's so important, right, Mike? We talk about it, and we're raising consciousness and what your group is doing. We will unpack later, but in that sense, about being woke, what is your thought for today on even that term and history and what you're going to bring to the show today? You're going to wake us up?
We certainly will. We certainly will. We're really going to talk. We're looking forward to sharing our organization and our approach, which is facts and data and questions, and getting people involved and comfortable with having conversations and dialogue and willing to learn. So it's wonderful to be here, and I'm looking forward to the other participants and learning from you guys as much as hopefully you'll learn from us.
I love it. And that's what it is. Thank you so much, Apryll. I loved meeting you and Mike, and we're going to be looking forward to later on the show when we hear all about what the good work you guys are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All righty. Debra Gardner up next. She's a friend of the show too. And she's been with us a couple of years, and she now is running again as a candidate in House District 76. And you're going to wake us up today, aren't you, my friend?
Yes, I am so excited to be on again and to be with you guys again. And yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting conversation, especially for Black History Month.
Yeah, I know, because we're going to concentrate on really about running a little bit on your angle today is really about some of the challenges Black women face, women of color face, running for office. And there's a long list. We have a lot to celebrate today with Jennifer McClellan getting into Congress. How are you feeling about that today?
I am feeling great about that. I've known Jen for a very long time. She is the perfect person to be sending. It's just sad, as she always says, that we're in 2023 and we're just now sending the first Black woman to Congress from Virginia. So that has got to change.
Yep, it has got to change. And I'm so glad we will talk all about that, because some of the stuff she faced and what you faced and what you can share with this group. And I love that your team is in there just putting in there, support you, support you, support you. And I love it, because that's what we're going to do today also. So thank you, Debra. It's always great to see you, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So the rules of the road, you're in the room. There's a great crowd here today. Look at all your faces. If you're a candidate, give a shout out, put your thumbs up. If you want to put a reaction up and pop up for a second, if you're running for office, just let us know, because we know that right now, Virginia, all eyes are on us. So I hope you're in the room. In the chat, we have Michelle McKinney up there. Michelle, there's Jenny Kitchen. Hey, Jenny. Michelle McKinney is our helps newcomers. She's our newcomer liaison. You have any issues, just private message Michelle McKinney. She's awesome. And she'll let you know if you're having any trouble in the room. Use the chat to share everything, talk and all that, but keep it civil or the bouncer will bounce you out. You know the rules. And our favorite part, the after chat, 1 p.m. We save that time to get all together, to have some fun and to share calls to action. And hopefully, if some of the guests can stay with us, we all unmute and we just dig deeper. Some of the richest conversations come in that private after chat. And I'm going to tell you, if you can stay, and some people just come for the after chat, we hope we'll see you on the other side of the show. And I want to say a big shout out to our latest Patreon supporters. Some of you may not know this, but we have a subscription. That's how we keep the lights on. I always hold my little mug up to send the signal. Thank you for supporting our show. It warms our heart. It really is great to invest in these unstoppable women, this team that just works every week. This is our third year doing this to bring you this great content. I want to shout out to Kate Dem, Bob Smith, and Donald Gurney. You got a special shout out because you upped your pledge from $5 to $15. We love Donald. So thank you, Donald, for doing that. It really means a lot. It really means a lot to us. So thank you. And next up, she showed up a second ago in the very beginning of our show. Co-host, creator, Fennell Norton also ran for office. And this is our favorite time to chitty chat. Hello, Fennell.
Hello, Catherine. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm going to put you on the spot, though. How are you doing? I want everybody to know you're in school. We're so supportive and proud of you. Have you made it through your tests?
I have made it through all of my finals. Yay!
If you've ever went to school over 50, that's a challenge. I was trying to figure out how to turn on my computer when I went back to school. So it's great. That is so awesome.
Yeah, all I have to offer them is wisdom. That's it.
That's a lot, though. I could tell you that being in class with a bunch of young folk, you bring a lot of the wisdom. Speaking of that, I want to make sure before we get started today that we call attention to the date today. If you saw the paper, today, February 24th, is the day Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And a lot of journalists, about 13, have been killed in that war. I want to make sure today really marks the day that, we're talking about fighting for freedom in here. And globally, we're seeing that kind of fight for freedom, suppression of people. So I love to just call attention to that and make sure that we keep on thinking about that war and how it's affected people.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Catherine, because I think that sometimes we sort of think about it so far away. How does it really affect us here and all the money that we're sending? And at the end of the day, Miss Margaret said it best earlier, that it's all about democracy. And when you see a country like Russia go into another country and try to take away their rights and freedom, and how hard the Ukrainians are fighting for it, this is a significant moment. And I think it brings us to this show and Black History Month in terms of what we as a Black people had to overcome in order to have at least some form of democracy and freedom. And we still continue to fight for it today.
Yeah, and it should be lost on no one that Russia has been interfered in our elections. It started with back in the 2000, well, maybe probably back to Afghanistan, but 2014 and 2016, the interference. And they're interfering in democracy. So this is, really relatable. And you can see it in our country with January 6th and the Republican Party's comfortability with Russia. You're going, what? There's something big going on, and we need to also pull back from this and look at a wider lens when we're talking about stuff. And I want to also bring up that, I've been watching this legal action against Trump. The special counsel, Jack Smith, is overseeing these criminal investigations. But you've challenged us to talk about Black history. And I want to shout out to the first Black woman to lead Georgia's largest district attorney's office. And that is Fani Willis. Fani Willis is bringing it, girl. And she's going to bring the house down. I say, let's make sure that she's in history. She is making history and she is saving. Really, we need accountability, and good for her. And that's my thank you for challenging me. And I brought something today to the table.
Well, thank you. And so I'm going to say two things that I think are really important. The first one is around education. And so I think Black History Month is our opportunity to be really intentional about educating ourselves and raising our awareness. So there's two things. The first one is the fact that in Virginia, along with Florida and other states, are now trying to challenge AP history as it relates to African American history. And this is so important. And I think people get lost on why it's so important. And at the end of the day, it is about education. When we are able to look at history and critically look at what the implications have been and how we should move forward through looking back at history, that is the reason why it's so important for them to want to suppress it, because it gives us knowledge and it helps us move forward. So we have to fight that every step of the way.
Good opening. Robin, I would love to share with you, if you guys know E. Mackey, he's a CEO of Black Spade, and a conversation that D.L. Hewley brings up about this topic. Go ahead.
Even what's going on in Florida, you don't even want us to learn our history. Like, there was a time when enslaved people couldn't learn, and now it's illegal for us to learn about enslaved people.
Yeah. That statement that D.L. Hughley just said was profound, because it hits at the core of a strategy that's been used since slavery to preserve and propel white supremacy in the United States. It's basically control the narrative and suppress children's access to information that contradicts the propaganda. On September 10th, 1894, an organization called the United Daughters of the Confederacy was created. People started to realize that the Civil War had ended 30 years before, so a lot of the soldiers were starting to get old and die out. Their thoughts were, if these people died out without giving the message, their ideology would die. In the beginning, the organization's primary focus was to raise a bunch of money and put up as many Confederate monuments and statues as possible. This is why there are so many Confederate statues and monuments in the United States, because the United Daughters of the Confederacy put most of them up. But after a while, the UDC realized that statues weren't enough. You had to actually teach this ideology to continue it going. So they came up with the Lost Cause. And basically, the Lost Cause is an ideology that says that Confederates were heroes. It says that slavery wasn't bad, that slaves were content with being slaves, and that slavery was not the root cause of the Civil War. In 1919, a woman named Mildred Rutherford came through to push this idea forward. It's important to know that Mildred Rutherford was a member of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. She was also a teacher, and she was a prominent white supremacist. And she creates this pamphlet called A Measuring Rod to test textbooks and reference books in schools, colleges, and libraries. The goal of this pamphlet was to create a guideline that schools could use so that they could have a cohesive message being taught throughout school districts across the South. So in this pamphlet, it said that some books should be completely removed from schools, while others needed to be heavily redacted or censored so that the messages of these books corresponded with the teachings and ideologies of the Confederate South. If a book didn't state that states' rights was a primary reasoning for the Civil War, it was taken out of schools. If it said that the Civil War was fought over slavery, it was taken out of schools. If a book referred to Confederates as traitors or rebels, the book was taken out of schools. And if a book stated that the South fought to keep slavery intact, it was taken out of schools. Now, these guidelines, this curriculum, was kept intact from the early 1900s all the way up until 1969. And it's believed that 70 million students learned this way. I can tell you it didn't stop in 1969, because I went to school in the South. I graduated in 2002, and I was taught some of these same things. You actually may have been taught some of this stuff too, or at least taught by someone that was taught this, if you've ever heard that the Civil War was fought over states' rights. It wasn't. The ideology came about because of the guidelines that were set forth in this pamphlet. In today's time, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is using these exact same tactics to whitewash the Black experience and essentially erase our history. This is why it's so vital that we take it upon ourselves to document and share the injustices that are committed against Black and brown people. or any minority for that matter. This is also why it's important for us to have open dialogues and discussions, because if we don't document and communicate, the history is lost. I don't know if you realize this or not, but we are literally living the history that might be hidden from our children in the future. It's important to know that from the beginning of time until there are no more people walking the earth, the winner of the war is the person that held the pen to write about it. It's also important to know that the United Daughters of the Confederacy is still in existence today and undoubtedly has members in it that are making laws, that are in positions of power and influence over the minorities that they're hoping to keep the information from. This is how white supremacy is preserved. This is how white supremacy is propelled. And this is the same way that they've been doing it from the beginning of time.
That I was like, could you just put it all together in one piece? And it really helps you see, right? Everybody in the room nodding.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hand it over to you, because I think bringing up the next guest right after that segue, my friend, is where we need to go. So I'm going to leave it because we're at 12:22.
All right.
Okay, for now, I'm excited about Margaret being here. I'll let you introduce her, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend.
Wonderful. So Miss Margaret is coming up, Miss Margaret Morrison, and she actually lived through Jim Crow in the Jim Crow South. And she is someone who participated in the marches, in the civil rights movements, even with John Lewis. And she continues to march. The last march was, I guess, the Women's March a couple of years ago. And she is wonderful. And I have to tell you, I'm going to let you hear from her. So Miss Margaret, we're so proud and pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. And it's good to be back with all of you. As you know, I appear frequently on this program because it means a lot to me to see people realizing that it takes more than one person or two people or one group or that group, but your group does it every single week. And you bring on people who are my idols, because each one is bending that arc toward a moral justice, and that's good to know. But I want to go back to, excuse me, you were going to say something.
No, you go.
Oh, okay. The young man we just heard on the video reminds me, excuse me, of W.E.B. Du Bois wrote Dark Water back in 1920, Voices Within the Veil. And there is a chapter in that book that talks about the souls of white folks.
Mm-hmm.
And in that chapter, he mentions how books come about being written that with incorrect information. And I happen to have just read that recently, so if you don't mind me just reading that. He says, everything considered, the title to the universe claimed by white folk is faulty. It ought at least to look plausible. How easy for then, by emphasis and omission, to make children believe that every great soul the world ever saw was a white man's soul, that every thought the world ever knew was a white man's thought, that every great deed the world ever did was a white man's deed, and that every great dream the world ever sang was a white man's dream. And I thought about that when I was dealing with Black History Month, because W.B. Du Bois was the first Black graduate from Harvard University with a PhD. And Carter Woodson, the gentleman who coined the phrase, it was Black History Week at that time, was the second Black PhD from Harvard, but he was the first one whose parents had been enslaved. He went to school. He didn't start a formal education until his teens, but he had the capabilities like so many other people who had been born enslaved, or the ones immediately after the freedom, who had the capacity to do great things, but was denied. And in my mind, I thought about these two people knew each other, Carter Woodson and W.B. Du Bois. And I thought about, I wonder if Carter Woodson picked up on what W.B. Du Bois was saying in 1920 about the omissions from history. And wonder if that's why he coined, what Dr. Coined founded the Black History Month, which brings me to the people you have on today. Um, the young lady who is running for office. She's a part of that tradition of pushing forward, making sure that people are aware of who we are and where we are. And a salute to the young woman, Mrs. McClellan, who has just been the first Black woman. That is amazing because she too is a Black history a phenomenon, really. I salute her. And there's one other person, since we're saluting people, and I'm thinking about you group, the group here, because you do this every single week for the past several years. And that's unusual. It's unusual to have that kind of a commitment. So my hat's off to all of you. Now, I'm not sure what you want me to talk about.
Well, I exactly, but I will follow up to say, you know, one of the authors that I love is Linda Hersham, and she did a book, and it's called The Color of Abolition. And it's really predominantly about Frederick Douglass and this whole movement. And one of the things that she says that happened during the abolition, during the movement to get rid of slavery was community on a regular basis. And that's what this group does, is to build solidarity through community. But today, you are the person that we want to hear about. And you grew up in the Jim Crow South. And all I want to know is what it was like for you to grow up. And I know that there were really happy times, but there was also something that today raised your awareness for you to be doing the work that you continue to do. So can you just tell us a little bit about your childhood and when you started to become aware?
Yeah. Your program's theme is consciousness. And it is, when I was 8 years of age, I wanted to go to the zoo. It was the end of my third grade year. And I slipped from school because I thought my older sisters were going and I didn't want to be left behind. But my mother had to explain to me that, no, you can't go because this is not your day to go to the zoo because of the color of your skin. And so I knew even at the age of 8 that something was wrong with that because my parents had always told me how wonderful I was, how all of us. And so I can understand why the color of my skin would prevent me from doing these kinds of things. And of course, as I grew older, I understood more directly what she was talking about. On that day, as an 8-year-old, it was interesting, and it was something about it that I knew, but couldn't quite explain until I was much older. And as the older I got, the more I realized that in order for something to be changed, people have to do something. And I realized people had been trying to do something for as long as there have been Black people on the earth. Black people, not just in America, but wherever they live, but especially for those enslaved people. So you can't talk about a beginning because there is no beginning, there is no end. It has always, since 1619, been a problem. Mm-hmm. And since the age of 8, I have always thought that I could be a part of finding a solution to that problem. And so my goal was to major in history. In later life, I became a genealogist. And so I do know a lot, which brings me to another term. We talk about consciousness on this program, but my other term is the conscience. What was it that drove so many people to do what we did in 1965? And you showed a clip of some of the trauma that was going on. And I can remember as vividly as if it were yesterday, sitting in my living room. I was living in Chicago at the time, watching the scenes from what became Bloody Sunday. And I can almost visualize today, I can hear the snarling dogs. I can hear the hoofs of the horses on the pavement, the streams of intense water pressure on the backs of young girls and boys and men and women, old and young. I can smell the mace. All of these things I can feel. And I believe, in fact, I know that so many white people saw that as I was seeing it. and their conscience moved them to action. I know my conscience moved me to action. And for the very first time in my life, I remember telling my husband, I'm going to die. If I have to die for the cause, I'm going, because what we are seeing is an attack on humanity. We should all do something about it. And so that led me to actually to put my feet on the ground to march. And so that's where I am today. I don't no longer, since COVID struck, I no longer go out and with large crowds, but my internal senses are always there. I'm still marching with them. So, but yeah, it's great to see you guys also marching, even if you're not there on the streets, you're still marching.
You and I have talked about this, and one of the things you say, because I know the last time you marched, it was the women's movement, and the pussy hats, the pink hats, and you were out there with CJ and team, and you had an opportunity to be part of that film for Sisterhood, which was really amazing, which is where I first saw you, and I just thought, oh my God, and I just had to, every time I heard you talk. One of the questions that I asked you was, when people say, I don't vote for this one issue, and we were talking about, I think we were having a conversation about abortion, and I asked you the question, what do you think about one issue voters when it comes to folks who say that they won't vote for this or they won't vote for that? As you have sort of lived through this whole space, and we're in this moment that we're in now, give us a little bit of your thoughts about how we move forward.
I wish I had the real answer for that, because for as long as I've been aware of voting as an adult, people have always done that. I think of the Catholic, women in Catholicism who believe that abortion is so evil that they are willing to let everything else go past. They don't care about the climate. They don't care about the guns. They don't care about immigration. They don't care about anything except the one thing. And for me, if people don't care about what is happening to the universe, to our planet, if they can't put that above everything else, even above human rights, because if we don't have a planet, it doesn't make any difference if we have human rights or not. We're all going to be suffering. So I don't know how to reverse that trend. I don't know how to let people know, why don't you list the 10 great things that are important, the 10 things that are of greatest importance to you, and pick those that you would be willing to do everything in the world to save those things. And it might mean that you have to forget about some of your wishes, some of your personal wishes, but I don't know how to go about doing that. But I know that two people on this panel who will be speaking are speaking to that also, because they too are trying to get people educated to the point where everything is important. Let's face it, abortion is important, immigration, but there are some things that are higher than others, which brings me back to the word conscience. It is that inner voice that tells you that what you're doing is either right or wrong. And for some people, that inner voice is telling them that that's not the right way to do it, but they're going to do it anyway. And education is the only thing I can think of. But how do you get to these people? I think about the Floridians who are so determined to strike history. Well, not strike history from the book, because let's face it, there is no such thing as Black history without an integral part of the United States history. So they're one and the same. Black people have been in the United States prior to their Articles of Confederation, prior to the Declaration of Independence, before the Constitution was written, before the Bill of Rights was there, before the amendments. We've always been there. So we are, whether you want it or not, we're always a United States history. So go on. Because
no, I'll let you finish.
Well, Fennell knows that once I get on a topic, I don't know because she mentioned,
Well, here,
you mentioned Frederick Douglass, and I think we talked about Frederick Douglass several weeks ago. And I'm reminded that I think I was talking about John Brown at the time, the abolitionist John Brown. And it was amazing that the two of us were just discussing this, but Frederick Douglass and John Brown became friends, well, they first met each other in 1848 and became friends. And I understand that in 1848, John Brown told Frederick Douglass about his plan to free the enslaved people. He was so intense. As an abolitionist, he was really intense about that. And Frederick Douglass later said that here was a man, a white man, who was so intent on humanity of a person that Frederick Douglass says he was okay with it. I mean, he could live with it, slavery, but John Brown died for it. And so when I think about Black History Month, in my little mind, John Brown becomes my model, because here was a white man determined to rid the world or to rid the United States of this disease and was willing to die for it. It was almost the same way I felt in 1965. I was willing to die for the cause. And a person's conscience does that.
it absolutely does. It is about that consciousness. And Catherine is here. So does that mean that? Does that mean that Jen is here?
Well, I know, and like you said, I hope that Miss Margaret will stay with us for the after chat to continue, because there's so much about your life that I'm sure, I don't know if you're writing a book yet, Miss Margaret. Oh, you need to. And I know that I would love for us to continue the conversation in the after chat, because I think it's a great segue to the next guest to talk about what we can really do about this bias. And I think that we're all going to be pretty excited to see that up. So, because we're at about 12:40. So, all right.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. So, Miss Margaret, we're hoping to see you in the after chat, and we'll continue this conversation. Cool. So, Are you bringing up again, Catherine?
No, we're going to bring up CommonBondz, because I think we're all excited. I'm sure Apryll and Mike have a lot to say, listening to somebody who's actually marched, went over that Pettus Bridge with John Lewis. So incredible, that story. So it's a really great setup for your segment. Thank you.
So yes, and so as we talk about raising consciousness, Mike and Apryll, you guys have a fantastic story about how CommonBondz came into existence. So why don't we just take a few minutes and just chat about what sort of took you guys to the top and said something's got to be done?
Yes. So I actually worked for Mike 21 years ago at Fleet Credit Card Services. It's now Bank of America, but I worked in the Learning and Development department. And there was a promotion. My background is in compliance. I worked prior to working for Fleet. I worked for the IRS as an auditor. So my background is in compliance, and I transitioned to Fleet, and there was an opening in the compliance department. So I was excited, promotion. So I applied for the position. I interviewed. In the meantime, Mike, who was in the C-suite, he came by. So my department was under his responsibility, and so was compliance under his responsibility. So he came by and he stopped by my desk, and he said he must have knew a little bit about me, because at the time I didn't really know him other than he was my boss. But he came by and said, Apryll, there's an opening in compliance. You should apply for it. But what he didn't know was that I did apply for it. I saw it, I applied for it, and I didn't get it solely because I know it was because I was Black. The interviewer, she was engaged for a minute, and then I could see through her nonverbal cues that, I wasn't going to get the job, because she sat back in her chair, she folded her arms, and her whole vibe said, you're a good candidate, but I'm not going to hire a Black woman. That's what her vibe said to me. And so when Mike came to my desk to tell me about the position, I had a decision to make. My decision was, my thought process was, should I be honest with, at the time, this is what I called him, should I be honest with this white man and tell him, how I really feel, or just keep it surface and just, thank you very much. But I decided to take a chance and be honest, because he thought enough of me to come and tell me about the position. I could be honest with him. So I was honest. I said, Mike, I did see that position and I did apply and I did not get it. And I'm telling you, I believe it's because I'm Black. I have the experience. I have the education. At that time, I was an auditor for 13 years. I had the experience. I had the education, and I thought it would be a good fit. But Mike, I really don't think that the lady was prepared to hire a Black woman. And what he did really, not only is the reason for our friendship for over 20 years, and the reason why we started CommonBondz, but I admire him so much. I respect him so much for what he did. And what he did not do was make excuses. He didn't make excuses. He didn't give me a counter offer and say, there'll be other promotions, maybe next time. He didn't do any of that. He said, give me a week. That's all he said, give me a week. And then in a week, I was out of the old role, in the new role. And that really let me know that, number one, he didn't have to tell me that he believed all lives matter, that my life mattered, that Black lives matter. He didn't have to tell me that. His actions showed me that. His actions showed me that, no, racism will not happen on my watch. And so, I call him my hero. From that day to now, he's been my hero, because his life exemplifies what it is to raise consciousness, to raise awareness.
Absolutely.
To actually walk the talk, not just talk it, but to live a life that will raise greater equity, greater awareness and fairness in our country. So it was because of that background that in 2020, after a very hard year of the pandemic, the country was forced to see another pandemic, which I call racism. That's another pandemic. So
Apryll.
Yes, ma'am.
So Apryll. So let Mike jump in for a minute.
Okay.
We're gonna. So let me let Mike jump in for a minute, because here's what I want to also get to, because this is, you were right. You said, this white guy, why is he gonna even pay attention to me? You guys became friends. And then George Floyd happened. And Mike, something happened for you. So talk about that, and then let's really roll into what CommonBondz actually does.
Yeah, I mean, as Apryll was starting to indicate, 2020 was a really difficult year. And, with Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and then George Floyd, for me, there was a little bit of an awakening. So I had always kind of prided myself on having a passion to help from an inequity perspective, particularly around education. So my parents were educators. I really was involved with a lot of educational work from an inequity perspective. But after George Floyd happened, I kind of reflected on it and said, there is something more that I can do here. I can't just be somebody who says this is wrong and things like that. So I reached out to Apryll to see how she was doing. Mm-hmm. And as you can imagine, she wasn't doing well. And she's provided, our relationship's been wonderful, because she continually provides me an education of a lens into a world that I can't see and I never will be able to see. But for me, the awakening point was, I'm a white male with power. And the fact of the matter is I have power because I'm a white male, not the status I'm at socioeconomically, et cetera. It's because I'm a white male. And, I felt that we cannot allow the continuous victims of the things that are happening to be the ones who have to solely try to solve the issue. So I asked Apryll if she would be willing to partner and have us start CommonBondz. And our focus really is to educate people about what drives racism and bias, and what actions we can take in order to eliminate it or drive greater equity within our society. And quite honestly and bluntly, it was focused more on educating white people. And from my perspective, it was my environment, which, while I pride myself of having a diverse group of friends and colleagues, but is primarily growing up in a white world. So as a white person who is educating people to this going on and people hearing it from a white person, particularly white people, there's a little bit more openness to listening. And our approach really is around facts and data. And we really ask people that when they make a comment, we're very focused on areas of unconscious bias and microaggressions. And when you think about unconscious biases, anytime somebody brings something up to me that I feel is an unconscious bias that is discriminating against somebody based on what they look like or what their sexual orientation is, not their political beliefs and things like that, because we all have biases to people who go down that path. But to me, I ask them why. Why do you think that? And when they struggle answering that question, I said, well, let's talk a little bit about history and how history has driven us to this point, and really educate them about history, and how history and decisions that have been made by predominantly white people have impacted not only African Americans, but other minorities as well. They're impacting them today. And what are we going to do about it to drive greater equity? And you talk about consciousness. I can't consciously look at anybody and treat them differently because of what they look like or what their beliefs are from a religious or an orientation perspective. So we started this, and we really focus on education from a foundational perspective, but really attack real life issues. So our next speaker series event in March is going to be looking at the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion programs in education and in corporations, and how important it is for corporations to drive these programs as a pressure to areas that are not driving these or believe in them. And so we try to really have our issues and our conversations be really involved with educating from real-time perspective.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. And so here's what I'm going to say for you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you will put all the information in the chat so that folks can come to that meeting in March. And I just want to also give a plug to say, it really is, if you go to the website, it is fantastic. It is every question that you always wanted to ask somebody, but you were kind of afraid to ask somebody. The answers to all of that is on the CommonBondz website, which is incredible. It's done by Mike and Apryll and their team, and it's fantastic. So Mike and Apryll, thank you guys so much for being here. And I hope this group will see you on a CommonBondz call in March.
Yeah, I want to say thank you. And I want to give Apryll the last word. I'm so impressed with this relationship. And what I love about it is, like, some of us here in this team have known each other over 20 years, but you've built this long relationship. And Apryll, why is that the most important piece of where you're able to accept this offer to be partner?
It's important. It was important then, it's important today, because I cannot allow my heart to get hardened, to be sad and bitter, and for hate to form in my heart. And I think that what happened 20 years ago, and even now today, it was a way that God put him in my life to say, Apryll, they're not, white people are not all evil. And we have to all work together. We have to all work together. And, I put in my bio that not all are guilty, but all are responsible. And so I think it's important for me to stay connected with Mike and others, because it's going to take the village, it's going to take community, it's going to take all of us to bring awareness and hopefully raise consciousness that racism is wrong, it's evil, and we have to do better as a country, and we need each other to do it. So that's why it's important, so that my heart can remain soft and that I can work with everybody to bring about change.
I think that's so important, Fana. I think you'd agree that it is about really meeting people, really growing to love them in a real way, that we can do this work. I don't think we could do it without it. And I agree with you. I feel the same way, how we're in each other's paths right now. I love what you're doing. I think this room is going to be talking a lot in the after chat about it. So if you can stick around, please do. And again, Miss Margaret, thank you. And just listening to you also about, really people willing to put their life on the line, their feelings on their line, everything on the line to make the world better. So we appreciate Mike, Apryll, and Miss Margaret. And lastly, I want to make sure we get to another fabulous guest who's been raising consciousness, I'm sure her whole life, raising the house, raising everything, raising hell, raising it, and raising money is what you want to do because you're a candidate. Am I right?
You're right about that, Catherine. And I am my heart. One of my best sayings is my cup runneth over. Today, my cup runneth over, because just having to hear this and having other people hear this validates, the internal feelings that as a Black woman I feel sometimes. So this is just so right on spot. So thank you.
It is. And I feel like too, the part of the relationship, because I think our team has made this conscious decision to go outside of our silos, like Mike was talking about, looking around and saying, what's missing and why is it missing? And that was, why don't I have more friends that are Black? Why don't I have more women friends, that are in this category? And you realize it's because of your history. It's because where you've been placed. And now it's your time to wake up. And when you have a platform to do more, you should. And meeting you in these last couple of years, I feel like we're friends. It's taken, just to meeting. What I mean by that is that this work can't be done with us trying to have trust in each other and trying to make sure that I can help you in any way I can. And that's why you're on today to talk about this, because you're running for office again. Mm-hmm. We need your voice in the House of Delegates, bringing their voice to policy, your perspective. But there's some challenges we talked about, and I want you to share with people to raise their conscious about, what is some of your challenges that you need people to know so they can give you money today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I certainly value our friendship, and I value the Power Lunch from day one, from just kind of being able to connect with women. But it's so important, as I do this as a Black woman, I have worked for women's issues for most of my life. But it's so important that we start talking about the intersectionality of being a Black woman, being a woman, being a mother, and that there are differences. Sometimes we don't want to talk about that. And so, in this political sphere, it really is something that I think we need to finally come and talk about, because, I will tell you about my experience. This is my third run. I ran locally, and then I ran in 2021. And first of all, I want to say I am so proud and so thankful for the support system that I have here in my community, because the women here are just really, really great and really supportive. So when I talk about what I talk about today, it's not to diminish that I don't have that support. It's just to make it, as Mike was talking about, make people a little conscious of maybe the unconscious bias that we as Black women experience. Even though, we run in the same way, we do the same way, we are different, and nobody wants to talk about those differences. And so when we talk about campaigning, I know I have like a lot of support. I have people who will give me, but it's really disheartening when I look at the reports on VPAP and see, well, yeah, these are my biggest cheerleaders, but I look at what they've given me and what they've given to other people. And all things being given and equal, their experience, their tenacity for running are the same, but there's that disparity in how they give. So I don't think people do it consciously. I don't think it's done, with malice. And that's why I think we need to talk about it and put it out there. You know,
let's talk about it. I saw the Black Virginia News do a graph on it. I don't know if you happen to pick that up. We had Lauren Burke, Victoria Burke on, and she showed this graph of the Black candidates, men and women, and the fundraising. Micaiah Little was in the lead. I was like, look at her go. She had some, but they talk about one of those challenges. I mean, when you do see it, what do you think it is? Do you think that people, when you call them, they give the guy maybe 1,000, they'll give you 500? Is it just they don't think you're going to win? Do you think it's just they don't think? What is? Do you think it's that bias just kind of in there? Sorry, my dogs are just barking in the background.
I think, like, I really do think it's unconscious, because you say they'll give a white man or a man 1,000, and they'll give a white woman 500, and then they'll give me 100. Mm-hmm. And, you know, again, I'm not talking anecdotally. You can go to VPAP. You can look at what is people's given record. And I think it's even those people who support us, it's that unconscious bias that maybe this person is not going to win, or maybe I look at her and I see, just like Apryll was talking about, she was probably, and she was, because she got the job, the most qualified person for that job. But all that woman in front of her saw was a Black woman. And in her mind, maybe she didn't interpret that as to why she came up with justification. And just recently, when I started running again, I had a conversation with, you know, some of my supporters about this, because it just kind of got on my heart. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to put this with people I feel confident about. And even the people who've known me for a while try to come up with reasons as to why people may have given me less. And, you know, when I was prepared for that, because that's what we always try to do, justify what we do. And then in the end, when, you know, I could point out these things, they said, well, I guess I never thought about that. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, there's data out there. I mean, Black women have been traditionally the backbone for the Democratic Party. We're the strongest voting bloc, but yet and still people look at us and don't see that we're capable of leading.
Let's go there. I think we need to go there, because I think if we don't, I think we have to uncover it everywhere. It's in our own party, because parties are full of people with this unconscious bias. And I'll just be frank, because I'm in the room with my friends on Facebook here, I mean, in general, but when I saw the Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, now we can call her that, run for governor, and Jennifer Foy run for governor, and we had some other people in the race, another Black man, Justin Fairfax, but specifically the women, the stuff that was said about the women running, these Black women, I really felt came from our party, some of them. And I was like, they don't really think these women could run. They said, they can't raise money. They'll never raise money. I'm like, if you get your ass behind them, and if you support them, maybe they will raise money. Because if you have somebody like Mike saying that needs to use that platform to say, we're going to do this. And then if that's what it takes, people come along. If that's what that takes, you know, that's what we got to do. What is your feelings on that? I mean, I saw it and I felt it and was frustrated by it.
And it's quite frustrating because, you know, you had two very strong, qualified Black women candidates. And, you know, the powers that be, the big donor class, the party bosses, as we call them, looked and saw Black women and said, they can't win. We even had our own looking at us saying, we can't win. So I'm not just saying that it's a white versus us. Right. It's sometimes our people who feel the same way. And we've just got to continue. And we do. I mean, look at Jennifer Kelford, look at my friend Jim McCullough. We're going to keep pushing. You know, that's why, you know, I say we have always been able to do more with less. We have always been able to put our chin up, put that bias aside, and look at those people who we know are intentionally doing that to us and smile, because we still feel like it's important to get the job done.
Yeah. And you know, so we are going to keep elevating your race and other races across Virginia. We have such an opportunity. If everybody's listening out there in Virginia, and November 7th, 2023 is going to be all 140 districts, Senate and House are up. You're running again in a new district. How does your race look real quick? Tell us a little bit about it. I'll give you the chance for that.
Cool. It's looking really good. You know, I was one of the prize winners when it came to redistricting. I actually went from a 50-50 district or a plus Republican district to a more Dem-friendly district. And so that's kind of a little frustrating, because when it was more difficult for me to win, I had a hard time raising money. Now it's a better chance for me to win, and I'm having a hard time raising money because they're saying you don't really need that. You're going to win anyway. But they don't look and see that I'm in a predominantly white conservative area, and I'm a Black woman. And so those issues are still important. And before we leave, I really want to talk about my call to action, is what I'm asking people to do, especially the women on this call, is don't just be a cheerleader for Black women and do a quick post on Facebook saying, oh, she's so great, she's so great. And then 6 minutes after that's gone, they're left out there alone. We need you to invest in us. Invest the same time, the same commitment, the same time knocking doors for us, the same time, making calls for us and talking to your friends and neighbors, not just that one post you do. And really make an investment, because, being a fangirl and not really putting your money where your mouth is, it's appreciated, but it doesn't really help elevate us to the level that we really need to be. And again, I don't think it's done in malice. I think it's done by people like unconsciously thinking about it. So what I ask is, and that's what I think Mike and I certainly know Ms. Margaret said, is be aware. Just think when you're doing these things, why am I doing this? And is the reason I'm doing this rational? And then look at us as people and not just as a Black woman. So,
And let's just say, when your race that you talked about, you had a harder race, you overperformed. I think Keisha Evans too. You were a performer that was like unbelievable, your numbers. If anybody wants to know if you should invest in somebody, you got to look at how they performed, and you overperformed, you hit doors, you did the work, and that should be rewarded by the people that have this, as we say, those big donor class should look at this and invest in Virginia, because this is how we're going to make sure the democracy stays here. I'll just wrap up with this, is that when I see what Mike talked about and Apryll talked about at CommonBondz, starting investing in equity, diversity, inclusion, and our governor saying that doesn't matter, and we are going to close that down in Virginia. We're going to have a snitch line for teachers. We're going to not teach AP, African Studies. I'll say another challenge in this room is that we all know better now. We are woke, and we will not let this happen. And we will make sure that with Virginia, we just take it back, and we really also take it back in the sense that it's spiritually where we need to be as a people.
Exactly.
So thank you, Debra.
We need all voices at the table,
and
that includes Black women. So I want to thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great seeing you again, and good luck with everything. And we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to go to the after chat, because it never stops. Our power lunch, the after chat is always great. If you've liked what you saw today, please invest in us. Talk about giving women money. Invest in us. We have a great team. You see them all up there. Every week we work together to bring you this content. We're so grateful for the guests that made time for us, especially Miss Margaret, so special. I want to say she is in her 90s. And am I right, Miss Margaret? Give me that age.
86.
Are you 86?
Reaching there, 87.
Oh, you're young. Okay, you're young.
Right.
I'm sorry. You're not 90.
No, well, you know what? Next week, it seems as if 3 years will go by in the flash of an eye. So you're almost right.
Almost right. I love it. I love it. I love it. And yeah, I was thinking, you were 90, but we are just going to have so many more years to see how we grow every year.
Well, I hope so. I turned 87 on February 4th, this February month. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, great. Well, are you going to stay in the after chat with us? So stay
I
with
will. Yeah, I will.
Stay with me right now, and don't go anywhere. We're going to keep you spotlit. And Miss Margaret Morrison is here making sure that we invest in Black women that are running for office in Virginia. Make sure that we give something in that. And Debra's Act Blue today, I will just say it out loud. And other candidates that are in this room, you can look around. Also, I want to say thank you to our Patreon supporters, the new ones that came in, Kate Dem, Bob Smith, Donald Gurney, who upped his pledge. Thank you. Follow us on social media, and also look at this wonderful team: Robin Warner, Sterile Calhoun, Heidi Dragneff, Dennis Orsinger, Michelle McKinney, Laura Martinez. Sorry, Laura, my mouth was just running. And also, I have to say, these women that help us with our content: Julie Galdo, Alvina McKell, Sally Renwald. Thank you. You make us seem so smart. Thank you for overlooking our graphics and all our content. We'll see you next week. We're going to kick off Women's History Month. And we will continue, though, celebrating Black history, women's history, API history. We are just doing this every week. We hope you join us. Let's roll it, Robin, and I'll see you on the other side.